Welcome everybody to this Virtual Housing and Communities Committee of the 8th of September 2021. I welcome you all, and this will be an appropriate time to welcome a new member. Councillor Frank Smith has joined us today. This will be his first committee. He's taken the place of Councillor David Illingworth, and I think we can all thank David Illingworth for his contributions over the period, and I'm no doubt that will be minuted for us. Could I ask, do we have any other apologies this morning?
Yes, Convener, we have an apology from Councillor McCall with Councillor Sarwar substituting. Thank you very much. And while I'm thinking about it, do we have any tenants representatives on with us this morning? You're welcome. Do you know? I am not aware of that at the moment. Fine. Okay, thank you very much. So we'll move on, and if I may, I will take the chance to introduce the virtual top table. So with me this morning, I have Councillor Chris Ahern, who is my Vice Convener, Barbara Renton, who is Executive Director Communities, Claire Mailer, Deputy Director Communities, Christina Flynn from Democratic Services Manager, and Kirsten Molly, Committee Services. I remind councillors, if I may, that obviously I can't see you all, so and as we're online, if you could use the chat box for the normal questions and comments. May I now ask Kirsten if you could do a roll call so we can see who's here for the record. Yes, Convener. Good morning, members. When I call out your name, if you could please confirm that you're present. So, Convener, we've heard from yourself. Councillor Ahern. Present. Councillor Bailey. Present. Councillor Liz Barrett. Present. Councillor Peter Barrett. Present. Councillor Jarvis. Here. Councillor Massey. Present. Councillor McEwen. Present. Councillor Sarwar. Present. Councillor Shires. Present. Councillor Smith. Present. Councillor Stewart. Present. And Councillor Waters. Present. All members are present, Convener. Thank you, Kirsten. Thank you very much. Before we progress any further, I need to make another welcome. This morning we have with us Chief Superintendent Phil Davison. You'll recall at the last meeting we heard about the retirement of Chief Superintendent Andrew Todd, and Phil is his now new replacement. So he'll be addressing the committee in due course, and no doubt will introduce himself as and when. On a personal note, I also would like to wish Councillor Barrett, Peter Barrett, a happy birthday. I believe it's his birthday today. I won't mention the number, but I'm sure he's pleased to start the day in such jovial company as us. May I ask members, do we have any declarations of interest today, please? If you could put DI in the chat box, that would help for me. I see nothing coming through, so we're fine on that. Members, can we agree the previous minute for the meeting of the 31st of May 2021? Agreed. Thank you very much. Agreed. Thank you. Fine, so we now move on to the papers. And as is normal for this part of the meeting, I'll ask the Vice Convener to take the papers on the Scottish Fire and Rescue report and the police report. Over to you, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Convener. So we're on item 4.1, which is the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service Quarterly Performance Report from the 1st of April 2021 to the 30th of June 2021. Can I now ask Stephen Wood and Ewan Bird to introduce the report, please? Thank you.
Good morning, committee members, and thank you, Vice Convener. Before I move to the Q1 report, I would like to provide a short update on the unwanted fire alarm signal consultation, which I raised in the previous meeting. The consultation commenced on the 19th of July and it will run until the 11th of October. The proposal is to significantly change the way in which we respond to automatic fire alarms in non-domestic premises in order to make more efficient use of our resources, particularly around operational training and our community safety work. The service is consulting on options for a future response, but I can assure members that our response to any report of fire will be unchanged and will be immediate and appropriate as it is now. Whilst the consultation documents provide comprehensive information on the background, the process, the proposals themselves and the safeguards, I do anticipate significant interest in the consultation. So it's my intention to invite members to an information session later on this month so that we can dedicate an appropriate amount of time to discussing the subject. Hopefully you'll find that useful, and an invitation will be forthcoming in due course. I would now like to move to page 7 of your pack and invite members to scrutinise, question and note the quarterly monitoring report for Q1. If we can look at the performance summary on page 12, you'll see that there's been a slight increase in the number of accidental dwelling fires. This increase, however, is not reflected in the number of accidental dwelling fire casualties, which indicates that early warning is limiting the severity of the fire and the incident itself. However, there's definitely no room for complacency with this, and we'll continue to focus our community safety activity in this area. We've also seen an increase in deliberate fire setting, and I will ask Group Commander Barrett to provide some context and information around that in a moment. And we've seen a decrease in the number of fires within non-domestic buildings, the number of road traffic collisions, and in the number of unwanted fire alarm signals. And whilst the report is predominantly positive, we are still seeing the effect of COVID restrictions on the way our communities are living and working. So I do expect that we'll see this reflected in the performance indicators for some time to come, and the full effect of that is not really fully understood at this moment. So before we take questions, I'll ask Group Commander Barrett to provide additional information and context around some of the detail in the report. Ewan.
Good morning, committee members. Just as Stephen has said, I'll go into this in a little more detail. So overall, our performance against the targets against the 3-year average is positive. However, there are a few areas of concern, as Stephen said, accidental dwelling fires and deliberate secondary fires. Within our performance highlights on page 12, it provides an overview of our 12 highlight indicators. If I focus on the increased number of accidental dwelling fires, 30 incidents have increased slightly against a 3-year average, which was 27. Fire damage in 12 of these incidents were low, 15 medium, and only 3 high. What's interesting is that only 17 properties had smoke detection, which operated in 14 of these incidents. Even as we move towards the introduction of our new detection standards, if we are attending a household for whatever reason and we identify that they have no detection, we will always fit a single point smoke detector, provide safety advice and an overview of the new detection standards, which will come into force in February 2022. The deliberate secondary fires have increased during Q1, and looking back, it was a similar situation that we faced in 2015. The main rises were in Perth City and Perth City North. We identified this spike and actioned it with an increased community warden patrols, and also Jim Mitchell, the community warden supervisor, and our community safety manager, Cami Sands, engaged directly with Perth High, the Academy and Grammar pupils. And just looking forward into Q2, we've seen quite a decrease, so hopefully we'll see that continuing. UFAS accounted for 26% of our total operational demand during Q1. Although we're in line to achieve our annual target at this early stage, there has been an increase of 22% for the same quarter last year and an increase of 3% against 3-year average. So overall, we are seeing the UFAS increasing. As Stephen said, as we move towards this consultation, we may see some significant change in how we respond to these unwanted fire alarm signals. Moving on further on in your pack, you'll see that the community safety engagement programmes have continued, where you'll see good examples of partnership and community engagement activities on pages 26 to 28 of your packs. And some of the notable incidents on pages 28 to 29 include a destructive garage fire in Comrie, an RTC on the A9, and a protracted incident at Shore Road recycling facilities. That overall gives us a summary of our Q1 performance, and Stephen and I would be happy to take any questions from you.
Thank you very much. I'll now open it to questions on the quarterly performance report. If you have a question, as normal, could you put a Q in the chat? Councillor McEwen.
Thank you, Vice Convener. More of a general question. Obviously, this summer has been one of the driest for 20 years. You know, reservoirs are really low, and you know, my expectation in this report was to see you having issues with wildfires and grass fires that ran amok, but that doesn't seem to be what's in the report. Did that surprise yourselves, or did you feel this was maybe going to be a summer where you were going to have some difficult fires to attend to because of the dryness?
What we have seen we've seen quite a number of wildfires further north out with PCAD, so it's not as if they've not been occurring. It's just that they haven't impacted us directly. We have had a number of flexi duty managers from this area responding to the wildfires up north, so they haven't gone away by any means, but we just have been fortunate in this area during Q1.
Thank you very much.
Councillor McEwen, if I could just add as well,
yes.
In terms of preparedness for that, we've undertaken some significant work across the service. Ewan himself is now trained up as a wildfire tactical advisor, so we're increasing the way that we can respond and the effectiveness of that. Ewan could probably talk all day about the introduction of new ways of fighting wildfires, and it is really a national response to this, because when we do get them, they can be up to 12 pumps at them. They're prolonged. They last over days. So we are fortunate that we've got trained advisors all over the country, including within Perth and Kinross, and we can call on that resources. This year it's gone north more so. In future years, I fully expect we'll see it within Perth and Kinross, but we are improving all the time in the way that we're able to deal with those incidents, because they are hugely resource intensive and destructive for the environment.
That's really good to hear. Thank you very much, Mr. Wood.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett, Peter Barrett.
Thanks very much, Vice Convener. I heard what Group Commander Baird said regarding the collaborative work with the wardens and the Scottish Fire and Refuse Service taken in response to the increase in deliberate secondary fires, but also this was a similar situation to what happened in 2015. Are there plans to do more early intervention and prevention work with schools next year ahead of the hot summer season, so that we don't see a similar spike next year?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Barrett. Yes, we always continue, and it was always part of our thematic action plans to undertake this awareness of secondary fires. And what we've seen is predominantly refuse fires, so it's very small bin fires. In actual fact, the crews have no longer left the station; they're back in again. So they're very low-level fires. It's just that they've been high numbers. And just as you mentioned there, yes, we have taken cognizance of this, and we will be doing that in future years, just at the start of the season, and if we are anticipating a warmer summer.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis.
Yes, my question is actually about smoke alarms and such like things. You mentioned them in your report, but is the uptake of them very low? Because you would assume that it's quite a sensible thing for most people to have, but you seem to indicate that wasn't the case.
Thank you, Councillor Jarvis. Is this referring to the new standard that's been brought in February next year?
Well, that's not on the statute books, but I mean, just it's a generally rather than on that specifically. Because it's not mandatory on people who are living in their own houses to get this, is it?
The current standard, no. It's the sort of thing that's picked up through building warrants, home reports when it comes to sales. So that really is one of the key focuses of the Home Fire Safety Visit programme that we've been running for a number of years. There are still people that don't have smoke detectors in their house. We push that through all our channels. We do as much partnership working around that as possible, but we do still see a number of properties with fires that don't have detection in them. The new standard will change that, and it does become a mandatory requirement, and that the enforcing authority for that would be with the local authority. So how that plays out remains to be seen, but I know the Scottish Government have they've undertaken some significant publication of that at the moment. Scottish Fire and Rescue are supporting that, as are a number of other partners across the country. So hopefully just that increased awareness will see an increase in the uptake of detections, but there are always instances where people just haven't fitted them, or we used to see the batteries removed. Sometimes they're just faulty and not maintained. So it'll be a continual campaign for us to make sure that public awareness is maintained around the issue.
Okay, I get most people to move on then, and their house has to be inspected. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I see Councillor Massey is the last one with a question in the chat. If anybody else has a question, can they please put it in? Otherwise, we'll move to comments after Councillor Massey's question. Councillor Massey.
Thank you, Vice Convener, and thank you to the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service for this report. My question relates to page 24 of our pack. I'm pleased to read that the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service take a proactive approach with youths and schools to educate them on the unacceptable antisocial behaviour and danger of deliberate fire raising. As a councillor for Perth City North, I'm concerned that 12 out of the 45 deliberate fires were in my ward. I know and I'm grateful for the swift action that was taken by the Fire and Rescue Service to this spike. My question is, of the 12 deliberate secondary fires in Perth City North, are you able to tell me if they were set by an individual or group, and if any action has been taken against anyone for setting these fires? Thank you.
From the statistics that we've got, it doesn't go into that detail, I'm afraid. We would have to. We can see whether it's been set deliberately or if it's been an accidental fire. But generally, when we're getting an indication that it's like a bin fire within the city or elsewhere, we can pretty much identify that it's been set deliberately. And on all occasions that we are mobilised, the police are informed of our mobilisation. So, and there's a lot of the times that we will liaise with the police on site.
Councillor Massey, if I could just add a little bit to that. Obviously, this is not a problem that's been isolated to Perth and Kinross, and across the country we've seen around a 30% increase over that period in deliberate fire setting. We have run some fairly successful pilots in Dundee. You can imagine it is an issue as well, and we've had some really good collaborative working with our police colleagues. There's a bit of a follow-up when we get a report. There's a bit more engagement between the two controls, and that has resulted in some I believe successful prosecutions, but certainly youths being identified as the culprits. There's been follow-up with the wardens in Dundee as well around making contact with parents. So it's been a good initiative there that we've done over the same period, and I fully expect that we'll be able to replicate that in Perth and Kinross, certainly as we move forward and moving into the bonfire period as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see any more questions. So is there any comments on the report? I don't see anybody putting in for a comment. In which case, thank you very much. Are we happy to note the report?
Noted.
Noted.
Thank you very much. Right, we'll move on to item 4.2, which is the Perth and Kinross Local Policing Area Quarterly Report for the 1st of January to the 31st of March. And I'll ask Phil Davison and Graham Binney to introduce the report.
Thank you, Vice Convener, and I'll start by saying it's a privilege for me to have taken over the post as Tayside Divisional Commander, and to be able to continue and build upon the excellent work of Andrew Todd, and to inherit the quality of policing officers and staff that we have across Tayside and in Perth and Kinross. I very much look forward to working with the many local partners. Stephen's mentioned there the close engagement with policing already, but it extends, much beyond the fire service, and to also working with elected members as we collectively seek to improve outcomes for communities of Perth and Kinross and wider Tayside. In terms of the policing report today, I trust that members have had the opportunity to read the report, and I therefore would not intend to go over the full submission. The report does provide a performance update and associated contextual information against the local policing plan for Perth and Kinross. It shows linkages into the local, into the national policing plan, and clearly also supports the Perth and Kinross community plan. As you've mentioned, Vice Convener, this report covers Q1 and the dates described, and I would say that is a period through which members will recognise relates to the gradual emergence out of the significant coronavirus restrictions. That undoubtedly makes direct comparisons to the same period the previous year quite challenging, as there were quite significant restrictions in place for that same period in 2020. And it also, with the easing of restrictions, coincides then with a return to more pre-pandemic levels of policing demands. And you'll see through the report, and I know we will likely touch on it, increases in relation to road use, increased visitors to the area, and the reopening of the licensed trade. As certainly looking forward, and we're moving in and through Q2, we see a continued easing and a similar pattern of pre-pandemic policing demand returning, with increased numbers of policing events and gatherings taking place, and of course that we are working towards and planning for the United Nations Conference of the Parties event, which will have national significance for Scotland. I know I've not been in post for long, only a matter of relative weeks, and despite that, I would certainly hope to be able to answer most questions here today, and where not, I'm clearly ably supported by Chief Inspector Graham Binney, who I know is well known to a lot of you, and has that key local area command oversight role and lead on policing activities for Perth and Kinross. That's probably as much as I'd like to say in opening and introducing the report. As I said, don't intend to go over the full detail of it, and I know members will have the chance to digest it, and more than happy to take questions. For Chief Inspector Binney, I don't know if there's anything you would wish to add in opening context first. Okay, back to yourself then, Vice Convener.
Okay, thank you very much. And before I go to questions, I'll apologise. I read out the wrong dates. My procedure's got the wrong dates on it, so it was meant to be the 1st of April to the 30th of June. Councillor Sarwar.
Thank you, Vice Convener. My question is on the increase of crimes within the public protection sector on a table that gives a summary of the year. So we see 133% increase in rape crimes and 20% increase in sexual crimes. I'm hoping some of this is to do with women feeling safer and coming forward and reporting crimes, but I just wondered what you could tell us is being done to support and protect women from sexual and violent crime, particularly in public spaces. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll hand over to Graham Binney in a second for the local context, but you're absolutely right, and as is described in the report, the vast majority of the instances that we see that are reported that show that increase are in the non-recent nature, and I think that is really helpful, that there is an increasing confidence to be able to come forward and clearly speak to not only the police, but it's the connection into the variety of supporting agencies, very much with that victim-focused approach. So I welcome the increase that we have in terms of non-recent, because it does demonstrate that that commitment we have to clearly pushing in and tackling and really looking to address the clearly significant challenges and vulnerabilities in that space. For a local context, I'll pass to Chief Inspector Binney.
Hi, sorry, it doesn't look like that Binney's in the meeting at the moment.
Okay, no problem. He's clearly having a bit of challenge with the internet gremlin, and I've no doubt will join us again in due course. The other areas in relation to sexual crime that give some concern, Councillor, is clearly in relation to the cyber space of things, and that is mentioned in the report as well. We are seeing increasing numbers of offences that come through under new categorisations, so relative to the transmission of indecent images via communication devices and otherwise. That affects more so our younger aspect of community. So in clearly the space of investigation, positive lines of inquiry through digital means, just in terms of detecting these instances, we clearly require the specialist support of national functions in the cyber arena, and that helps us to navigate forward for the detection of offenders. But it's in the preventative space that's really key in this, and I think the returns and openings of schools provide clear opportunities. The aspect of media that we can put out through various channels to clearly support and educate as best as possible the dangers in the online space, and that is certainly a key area of focus for us going forward. I hope that answers your question, Councillor.
Thanks. Can I ask a quick follow-up?
Yeah. Yep.
Are you able to tell me, of those that come forward to report a rape crime, what's the rate of prosecution?
Okay, I don't have immediately at hand, Councillor, I'll be honest, the rate of prosecution to be able to give you that exacting figure. I don't know if Graham's back on from the local context to be able to do so. Failing that, I will be able to get that to you off table.
Okay, thanks. I would appreciate that, and it might be of interest to all of our members, so it'd be good to send that information out to everybody.
Yeah, more than happy to undertake that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Peter Barrett.
Good morning, Chief Superintendent. My question follows quite closely onto the response that you were giving Councillor Sarwar, and it was regarding the statement on page 31 of your report, or page 68 of the pack, which states that around 1/4 of recorded sexual crime has a cyber marker. And I wondered whether that data was broken down further into online child sex offences and those involving young people, and further by the platforms used in what you referred to as the transmission of indecent images to commit the offence, whether that's text messaging, Instagram, Snapchat. Are these the platforms that the public should be most concerned about regarding risk of online sexual criminals? And is that where the police can focus effort and best prevent child sex crimes? And the follow-up to that was, is there evidence of improved understanding and response to cyber crime in Perth and Kinross, which is one of the impact measures used to monitor the progress of the Police Scotland national cyber strategy?
Thank you, Councillor, first of all, for your question. So the breakdown of offences in the cyber space are varied, and they touch across a number of platforms. Clearly, there is the more significant end of the scale, which has high-end offenders that are certainly looking to distribute images and capture images, and otherwise place particularly in a place of vulnerability. But right to the other spectrum of one-on-one cases, which may be that it's images taken by an individual and then clearly passed to another. So it's in that space. That makes the spread of preventative activity that needs to be applied quite varied. So at the one end of the spectrum, there is clearly the need to focus on preventative messages for young people to not expose themselves in situations that may then lead to such offences. And at the higher end of the scale is the very much proactive activities that we take in a very much a pursuit-based approach through the detailed investigations that we would apply to track down those most serious of offenders. For awareness, colleagues on the line, Chief Inspector Binney's joined me in my office here at Perth, so I have that local context ability to be able to provide him from the same point. I trust that helps answer that initial question though, Councillor Barrett.
You're on mute. Peter, you're on mute.
Sorry, thank you for that, Chris. Yeah, if there's anything further that you can provide in terms of illustration of improved understanding and response locally, then I think that would be helpful too.
Okay, I'll bring in Graham. I know he's obviously missed the initial bit of conversation, but Graham, Councillor's question in terms of local responses and approaches to the sexual activities in relation to the cyberspace. So
okay. Yeah, it's been, this isn't a new phenomenon. When we look back at, I think I heard the original question about Group 2 crime figures. It's probably worth a comparison to 2019, and our Group 2 recorded crime is down from 2019. However, that's not, we still are not in a satisfactory position. It's fair to say that the majority of cyber-enabled crime affects young people as victims. We've had for some time a regional collaborative across Tayside, which has prioritised trying to make an impact to try and protect victims in that cyberspace. And I make no bones about saying that the protection and prevention and intervention is probably the most important part, because some of the offences are being committed by people overseas and in jurisdictions where we don't have access to the same investigatory tools and evidence. So there probably has been a little bit of a hiatus in the last year because of COVID, and that's something we need to pick up again. I myself reached out to two of the head teachers, including a new head teacher at the high school in this last couple of weeks, and we've had conversations about how we restore some of that activity, and particularly about, there's no doubt that there are lots and lots and lots of preventative work taking place around young people. I think the important issue is figuring out which works and which don't work, because there's lots of energy invested into this space. But we still see continuing levels of crime and engagement of young people in these sort of behaviours as perpetrators and victims. So for me, the priorities are figuring out what works and make sure that we can put any investment and resources and money into the right areas to try and make an impact in trying to protect our young women in particular.
Thank you. Councillor McEwen.
Thank you, Vice Convener. In the last committee, I asked about housebreakings and how the public themselves could help the police in detection. I talked about CCTV cameras and stuff. But I noticed obviously this quarter's statistics have gone very positively in the right direction. I'm wondering if we have any explanation for that. Have we caught a couple of persistent criminals and that's taking the stats down a big chunk, or is there something else that we're now doing more positively that we can encourage?
We continue. Thank you for the question, Councillor. I would like to say our messaging about preventions has been effective. I can't definitively say that's the case, although we do continue to push out these messages. But I understand, you know, in my capacity as a private citizen, it requires a certain degree of investment in a property to make it entirely safe. It's probably worth just highlighting where we see our acquisitive crime patterns happening. We've kind of got two patterns, one of which is people committing cross-border crime, particularly groups from other areas of Scotland, and we have had some success in targeting those groups. The more common type of offending relates to easy targets, so sheds, vehicles and equipment that's left unsecured in vehicles. And we continue to push out the messaging. The type of people committing those crimes are, we think, the same people who are committing antisocial behaviour and shoplifting, and trying to find these easier targets. So that's where we're trying to put our energy into, trying to catch and detect offences that they might commit, whether it's housebreaking or shoplifting or any other of that sort of offending that affects the community, but also speaking to our partners in the local authority to try and put interventions in and outreach services which are available into these people who may be affected by substance use, or may be committing offences, or may have other issues like housing issues that we have to try and fix, because we realise that just following that criminal justice route is not the only and often the best solution to try and prevent that criminality. So it's a bit of both. I would like to say we continue to push the messages to try and maximise opportunities for people to keep property safe, but we continue to target those who commit that volume type crime that affects communities.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Shires.
Thank you, Vice Convener. My question centres around, I think it's page 25 of the pack, and it talks about the challenges of not being able to provide safe drive, stay alive. I've been a councillor now for the best part of 15 years and attended quite a lot of these events, and I can completely understand why the format is a challenge in the current circumstances that we find ourselves, but equally the messaging that comes from those events, particularly to, my phone ringing, particularly to young drivers at that stage in life is so important. And I noticed you're talking about a package that's developed elsewhere in the country, and I just wondered where we were at with this, because obviously it is something that has a huge impact on the young people that attend, and the messaging that we need to get across to them at that stage when they're sitting driving lessons and heading out on the road as new drivers.
Councillor, thanks for the question, and I absolutely appreciate it. I think the lack of traffic on the roads over the past year through the pandemic, and now the backlog in driver tests for young drivers and various things has, I suppose, helped the fact that we've not been able to deliver the Safe Drive Stay Alive through that same period. As we clearly emerge out of it, and we are seeing quite clearly increased road usage, then the focus rightly needs to accelerate back into the enforcement, the education space in both parts, and both with equal importance, that clearly, as will be seen by the increased speeding figures, the work that we're doing to clearly look at enforcement in that space, and the very visible policing presence to keep our roads safe, but equally in the education space, the working and looking at the opportunities that we have to best influence and educate young drivers on safe use of vehicles. Graham, from a local.
Yeah, no, thank you. I welcome Councillor Shar's question, and always welcome her interest in this area. I completely agree that Safe Drive Stay Alive has been one of the best evaluated educational prevention activities that we have done, and coming from a public protection background as I do, I think it gets the messages right, and we've tried to replicate that in some of our other education programmes. What I can say is that I've been involved in 2 or 3 conversations in the last month where it is absolutely recognised that we need to start again, and as Mr Davison says, you could speculate that some of the increased speeding figures and concerns about driver behaviour may be motivated by a couple of years of young people that we've missed during the last year. So we absolutely have to do that, and schools recognise the importance and value of the Safe Drive Stay Alive programme. So I can probably give you assurance that it's a subject of ongoing conversations, because we recognise it works. And it's something we need to reinvigorate.
Thank you. I see you have a supplementary question, Councillor Slade.
Graham's kind of answered it, and it was just to ask what ongoing discussions are taking, and just to get that assurance that those discussions are taking place, and that the council is a partner, that if there's anything we can do or seek funding from organisations to make this happen, because I think all councillors across all the chamber all understand that this is one of the most important courses that we can offer young people at that particular stage in their driving career, and the hard-hitting messages that come through. And my supplementary would be: is the Scottish Government, are there fund, because this is something that is Scotland-wide, is there Scottish Government funding that we can perhaps look to access to make this happen?
Councillor Shers, can I perhaps offer to get an answer which is probably more meaningful that I can deliver at the moment and contact you personally? As always, I welcome your offer of assistance in this area, and I'm quite happy to share that answer with other members of the committee. It's probably better I can get that detail if you let me look at that, and I can respond to you in the next few days.
I think if I would just add to that as well, I think while we'll give that commitment to get the specific feedback on the Safe Drive Stay Alive and the return clearly of the very focused direction into young people, I think I would just give that assurance that policing are not alone in the recognition of this. So the point there, Councillor, around about that engagement in with local authorities, the Road Safety Scotland, our own national roads policing function, and various others, that the fire service as well, that clearly recognise the impact of safety on our roads. And earlier on that page 25, there's the reference to the number of educational videos. There's a range of activities that continue to be ongoing with education as a focus to minimise clearly the impact on our roads.
Thank you very much. I think that information will be useful for all members on the committee. Councillor Stewart, you have two questions. If you'd like to ask your first question, and we'll come back to second questions after everybody's had a chance.
That's fine. Well, in that case, I'll upend the order. I was going to ask them to follow on from Councillor Shar's questioning on road safety. Just a very quick point to note. I'm looking at the road traffic accident fatalities for Q1, and there aren't any, but that will be, I guess, significantly up in Q2, because there must be there's certainly two I can identify, name, and probably even more than that. But my question really is around enforcement of speeding measures. So given the significant extension of 20-mile-an-hour limits, 40-mile-an-hour buffer zones, school exclusion zones, which has been implemented by the council and local authorities across Scotland, often with spaces for people funding, what's the policy or operational methodology for enforcement in these areas, particularly 20-mile-an-hour limit zones?
So I'll maybe come to some local context from Graham in a second, but certainly in terms of the roads, there is significant data available to us across the country, not just from statistics in terms of road crashes, road accidents, but through insurers and various other parties that help to develop a focus on key areas that we need to clearly look at, the range of measures that need to be applied educationally or enforcement wise. So I think it's important to note that assessment of data is an ongoing matter and enables the prioritisation and focus across the country, not just on key trunk roads, but in local areas as well. So we respond very much in that intelligence-led way to where we look to provide the focus for enforcement. Now that can be undertaken by a number of means, clearly through our roads policing department themselves, but also through local officer action, the use of speed detection equipment, and other means, the deployment of safety camera vans, and such like. So the assurance I would give just in terms of the opening up to the response to this question is very much that where the prioritised need exists, we are assessing that through data clearly on an ongoing basis and deploying our assets accordingly to meet that. The report details some of the priority routes, but clearly there are local areas that then receive additional attention because of either the way that data takes us or because of community concerns that we clearly listen to and then go and respond and put in place. So Graham, I suppose from a context.
Thank you. No, I agree that the prioritisation of where we do our speeding enforcement is often primarily based on where the highest risk of death or serious injuries are, and that could be partially responsible for the more enforcement we see and the increase in speeding figures. Let me just touch on the 20 miles per hour limit because it has come up and there's an acknowledgement that there was a lot of 20 mile an hour speed limits put in place. The national position has for some time been that we won't routinely enforce all of those, just the sheer number and the fact that the data suggests that the risk is often elsewhere. That's been a position across Scotland for some time, and that we look to other methods of prevention and engineering around the roads to try and prevent increased speeds where the 20 mile an hour limits are. However, it is worth acknowledging what the position we've taken is that if there are additional vulnerabilities around these 20 miles an hour limits, and you highlighted one, Councillor, as schools, that we will look to enforcement and activity around those because that adds to the risk to pedestrians and other road users. And as you've highlighted, other measures like school exclusion zones and our roads policing and local officers have been in and around schools, particularly when they've opened again, to try and enforce, if we need to, 20 miles an hour limits.
So just a quick follow up then. So you were saying that this is largely risk-based, enforcement or monitoring and enforcement is largely risk-based. That's data and intelligence-led, but you did also say that it was led from information by communities. Where the buffer zone, the 40 mile an hour buffer zones and the 20 mile an hour limits have gone in, that is as a response generally to community concerns. So, communities have identified for themselves where there is a risk. So to say, I'm just trying to get my head around if 20 mile an hour limits are generally not enforced because they're not nationally, I think you said, because they're not deemed to be high risk areas, but they've been put in place because the communities have identified them as high risk areas. Is that not a sort of mismatch between the two priorities? And how many of the speeding offences have actually been detected in 20 mile an hour limits? How much enforcement do we do in the 20 mile an hour zones?
Thanks, Councillor, for that question. The bit around about answering to community concerns is rightly, as a service with policing by consent, we want to make sure that we are looking closely at concerns that are raised by local communities. So on the one hand, we've got absolutely that intelligence-led and data-led focus to the areas of greatest risk, and that is clearly where we need to prioritise our activities. When community concerns are raised, we clearly don't want to dismiss those, but there is the twofold level of response to it. So there are lower level interventions or explorations we can put in first. So one might be speed check equipment, which can then highlight the perception of speed and assess whether there is the data to support those community concerns. And that sort of monitoring can then enable, along with additional stats, additional focuses in that prioritised sense. So that's where the two things tie in, is the monitoring in response to community concerns, building up to the prioritisation and clearly the selection of areas of focus. I trust that makes sense.
Okay, thanks. And do we know how many of the speeding offence detections happened in 20-mile-an-hour limits, or, for example, 40-mile-an-hour buffer zones? We've got the really high notable speed detections, you know, 118 in a 70-mile-an-hour limit and that sort of thing. But do we have any of the? Do we know how many of them happened in these newer? How many of the detections happened in the newer zones?
So thanks, Councillor. Neither Graham nor I have those figures at hand, so that I'll take a note of that, and we'll clearly get that fed back to you or for wider members as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Vice Convener. I want to ask a question on the wildlife crime, and where we see, you know, as a percentage-wise, there's been quite a reasonable increase in wildlife crime, and numbers-wise, it doesn't look quite as big an increase. Regarding the challenges over detecting this type of crime, would you be able to give just a wee bit of an update on doing that? And especially in relation to a lot of rural crime that we have, is often the impression is that it's carried out by people out with the rural areas that are moving in. Regarding the detected and any evidence or any suspicions over the undetected crimes in this area, are they generally people from within the localities, or are the general suspects or the people who have been charged with the crime without the areas that the crime's taken place?
Thanks for the question, Councillor. I think there are some of these inquiries can be complex. I think probably I picked up on you asking about the profile of those people who perpetrate these type of crimes, and my knowledge of wildlife crime is such that I would suggest that perpetrators are no respecters of local boundaries, so that we will have a high degree of commission of specific types of crime targeting certain types of wildlife or animals being committed by people who are travelling not only across Scotland but across the UK. That will obviously give us more challenges in terms of detecting these crimes in trying to track down those offenders. And as you say, the obvious difficulties are often the lack of eyewitnesses or the lack of CCTV opportunities. These are just a number of factors which are always the case in more rural crime, whether it's acquisitive crime or wildlife crime. So they are more difficult to detect, but the network of wildlife officers we have across the country is probably designed to make sure that if there's cross-border criminality ongoing, including between Scotland and England, that we're able to gather that intelligence to try and prevent or target those offenders, and not just look at this as an issue within Perth and Kinross or Tayside or Scotland for that matter.
Thank you. I see Councillor Stewart and Councillor McEwen both have a second question. If they could be reasonably concise. Councillor Stewart, would you like to ask your second question?
Thanks. So I'm aware that there was a sort of multi-agency approach in Perth city centre to reduce vandalism and antisocial behaviour by young people, and I think that's been largely successful. What I'm concerned about from a lot of reports in Scone is that activity has simply been displaced elsewhere within Perth and Kinross, and I wondered if there was any evidence of that, or how we deal with the potential that antisocial behaviour is displaced rather than simply stopped.
Operation Stung, I think, is what you're referring to, Councillor. So thanks very much for that question. And it's always across any area that we have for policing, when we provide a focus on a particular hotspot or challenge, there is always the risk of an element of displacement. We clearly look to educate as part of the activities to try and mitigate that, but sometimes there are consequences, and therefore it gives a shift in focus to multi-agency approach. But because that's got a local context to the answer to the question, I'll let Graham come in and just give one of the split response.
No, thanks, Councillor. I largely accept your comments and agree with you. Operation Stung was designed to target individual series of violent crime, which was successful in dealing with certain groups of young people, and we've reduced the offending by those groups and put interventions in to try and divert them from offending. The next step was obviously to look at a more compassionate way of dealing with young people who were probably legitimately gathering in public spaces, but were either then start to behave in an antisocial manner or were given concerns to the local communities. I accept and I agree with you about a potential displacement of that. What we saw over the last year was very large groups using the public spaces in Perth. Those groups have dissipated a little bit, and there are smaller groups emerging elsewhere, most of whom are well behaved. However, you did cite the Scone, and another one or two issues have appeared in Creep as well. So we are aware of that. The approach that we have taken, and which is always available for or subject to review, is as part of our Operation Stung, we managed to secure additional youth engagement officers and partners who were out on the street at the relevant times engaging with young people. That has worked to a degree, because it means that we don't necessarily need to deploy police officers straight away and get engaged in either children bomb bursting and us ending up with missing young people or drunk young people who will have to recover and give us concerns later on in the evening. So that youth engagement team has been very successful. And I understand from a community perspective, the visibility of those youth engagement workers are not as obvious as high visibility police officers in high visibility uniforms. But I think we need to probably do more to address the risk of displacement and make sure that what resources we have at our disposal, be they police or partnership resources, are actually focusing on any displacement that we've created from our legitimate attempts to target these public spaces in Perth. So I accept your point. I agree with it, and could assure you that's something that we're considering thinking how we deal with at present.
Thanks. It'd be good to maybe follow up on that at the in the next report to see how we've advanced that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McKeown, followed by Councillor Smith, which will be the last question.
Thank you, Vice Convener. This week, the Police Federation issued an assessment from their officers and members that seems to indicate that officers are a bit concerned about their own personal safety, with an increase in attacks on officers themselves, which is obviously abhorrent. And I know for yourselves that one of your first priorities will be the safety of your officers. I understand that already. So my question based on that comes in, within Perth and Kinross itself, we're a very rural area. So I wonder if any officers have to work on their own, body cams is a recent thing that's come in for officers. Do all our officers wear body cams?
Thanks for the question, Councillor. There's probably a bit of national context, and then I suppose a bit of local context I can probably give in response to that. So yes, I think over the past year there's been around about 7,000 assaults on police officers and staff over the year, which is not only up on the previous year, but is 18% up on the 5-year average. Clearly, that is unacceptable, and it isn't just police officers that are subject to that violence. It's other emergency service workers who are trying to do the best jobs they can for communities. In addition, there's the clear and essential role we play to public safety. So we are always, as a service, reviewing the most appropriate options that are available and aligned to us to get the balance right of policing by consent and the European Convention of Human Rights. And in terms of I'm aware of the report that you reference, in terms of an armed position, that the position of Police Scotland remains that we're an unarmed service with an armed capability. And that armed capability does assist as we need it to the higher risk profile of incidents within Perth and Kinross and Tayside. There's certainly no desire at this point to seek towards a routine arming. So it's looking at the benefits of less lethal options that we may have to consider to both increase the safety for our staff, but also by consequence increase wider public safety. And you mentioned body-worn video, and there's been recent consultation, both public and with councillors in that regard. And I would also add to that taser, which has also been subject of recent consultation. And in respect of taser, and I suppose this is where it has a particular impact in some of our more rural areas, is a commitment from the service after that consultation to uplift our taser officers by 1,500 over the next couple of years. What that means for Tayside is that we get a proportion of that. There'll be a 50% uplift on our taser officers' capability and capacity within this financial year, and then a further doubling of our number and spread over the course of the 3 years. In terms of body-worn video, that is very much coming to the conclusion of its consultation. I wait to see actually where, from a national perspective, that's going to result in terms of implementation. But from a commander's perspective, I welcome both. I welcome the feedback from both the public and elected members to both areas, and I think both will bring proportionate additional security provision for both the officers and staff, and an element of reassurance to the public in that they are clearly less lethal, non-lethal options that are known and proven to have a positive impact on violence. I hope that helps answer the question.
It does, and thank you very much for tackling that topic, which is sort of outside our report. Thank you.
Thank you. Final question from Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Vice Convener. First of all, I'd like to apologise if this has been asked before, as this has been my first meeting. I have great respect for the police force, which unfortunately is missing a lot in society today. My question is, I'm a very keen leisure cyclist, and I really did welcome that close pass that you brought in, which was really good. The question I have is that when I've been downtown quite a bit, I've seen some terrible reckless cycling, which has almost caused some real accidents and very close to causing some real problems. I wonder if there was any action being taken by the police officers in the city, for instance, of Perth, and it's happening out with cyclists recklessly going down pavements and could cause serious injury and will cause serious injury one day. And is there any action being taken, or is anyone doing anything about it? Thank you.
Councillor, thanks for your question, and certainly the policing report we've put in there does reference close pass and the importance of it. But on your particular point and clearly the local aspect of it, I'll pass to Graham.
No, thank you, Councillor. Thanks for the question. I accept that close pass and other activities to protect cyclists have to be balanced with the need for cyclists to behave responsibly on the roads as well. In terms of your enforcement question, I can't cite any examples of enforcement action that has been taken, albeit that there may be occasions where officers have had to speak to cyclists that information won't necessarily, nor does it need to be reported back to me. However, we are very conscious that cycling is becoming a big issue from a health and well-being perspective, from a sort of carbon neutral perspective. It is being encouraged. So there are a number of things that we're doing with our community team of I've done a lot of work, I've received funding to get e-bikes, and have done a lot of work with young people, and are working in conjunction with the road safety officers at the local authority to see what we can do in that space. Akin to the conversations we had about Safe Drive Stay Alive, we had a conversation with some of the schools this week about what we could do in that space to educate young people on responsible use of bikes, and some really interesting ideas coming from places like the high school as to how we use funds to encourage cycling, but to also encourage responsible cycling. So early stages, but I accept your point, and those conversations have happened and need to gather some momentum, given that we're encouraging the use of bikes within the community, and hope to see a considerable uplift in the future.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's the end of the questions. Are there any comments on the quarterly report? Don't see any comments. In which case, thank you very much for that, the report this morning. I'd just like to finish, and I'm sure I speak on behalf of all the members of the committee, that we would like to show our support for the police across Tayside and recognise the challenges that you're going to have in the next few months when you'll be having officers going off to Glasgow to support the COP26. So I wish you luck in your efforts for both COP26 and the continued policing in Tayside. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vice Convener, and thank you as well to members today for what's been my first meeting. I've taken the notes and will undertake to get that additional context and information across to members, particularly around about the prosecution rates in relation to sexual crime and the offences under the 20 mile per hour aspect to it. And thank you.
Thank you very much. Convener, over to you for the rest of the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Convener, and I'd just like to add my thanks to the Police and Fire Service for the work they do for Perth and Kinross and Tayside. Members, we now move on to the next paper, which is paper 5, which is the Community and Planning Partnership Update. It is a short paper, so we'll, in this case, as we have in the past, go straight to questions. I believe Mr. Stoker, David Stoker, is with us, so may I ask members, do we have any questions regarding this paper, paper 5? Councillor Stewart, I see you've got 2 questions at the moment, so we'll go for the first question.
Yeah, thank you, Convener. It's in relation to action 3 from the Community Planning Partnership Board meeting of the 2nd of July, where it says that the board would agree the recommended priority areas at the board meeting of the 20th of August, which was obviously about 3 weeks ago, or sorry, 2.5 weeks ago. So I just wondered whether that was done and what those priority areas are.
Hi, thanks for the question. We've not agreed those areas yet, Councillor, because of the August holidays. We couldn't get all of the short life working groups together, so some of them have had to move into September. So that work is still ongoing. We've got one more group that we want to convene, and that's around education, learning and skills. And once we've done that, we'll then look at the locality profiles and how the locality profiles match those priorities in the LOIP, and see which areas would seem most appropriate for that work.
Thank you. Did you want to follow your other question? There's only one person behind you, Councillor Stewart. Do you want to go ahead with your next question?
Yes, thanks. So it's in relation to the participation requests in section 3.4 of the report. There was one valid request which was refused due to the project nearing completion of the tendering phase. And I'm very aware of what that request was. So it was just to reflect, or whether officers had any reflection on the fact that that was actually the 3rd or 4th submission of that participation request. I think it had been handed in to High Street and then delivered by, and then lost and then delivered by registered mail. And So when we say that this one was rejected because or was refused because the project was nearing completion, what's the reflection on, well, actually, if we had addressed it properly any of the first 3 times we'd received it as a council, then it wouldn't have been too late to be included.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. Yeah, we've had quite a bit of discussion around that participation request and the process, and also the various bits of correspondence with the group as well, who I think have been involved at stages in the consultation, but not via a participation request. I mean, the process for formally submitting a participation request is to email the community planning team, and Lee and the team have gone through the emails a number of times to see if that actually came in that way, and we never received a participation request via the email. But as you say, the group say that they you know, handed that in or you know, sent that in via letter. So we've not got, you know, the participation request, if you like, was never formally progressed with the group. But from speaking to colleagues in economic development, we know the group were involved and have been involved, and I think there's been communication with them recently about how they can be involved as the project develops. But Lee or Claire may wish to add something.
Claire, are you with us?
No, I mean, I think there's not significantly more to add to what David said. I'm not sure if Lee is here, but as David's indicated, the team have obviously reviewed the process that was followed, and, you know, unfortunately, obviously, the request didn't come through the agreed channels, but there has been significant communication and dialogue, and I think support given to the group through not just Lee and David's team, but also through the economic development team in terms of engagement, both now and indeed going forward. And I think the commitment to maintain that.
Did we, just to follow up quickly, did we ever track down what happened to any of the original submissions, why they didn't, despite not being submitted by email, but being, you know, handed in person and delivered by registered mail? Did we ever work out why they hadn't made their way through to the community planning team, A? And B, given that this issue was also raised at the liaison meetings that happened with senior officers in the community service and planning, why it wasn't followed up on, why the missing participation request wasn't followed up on again at an earlier stage before the final submission, which was deemed to be too late.
Yeah, we never tracked down the submissions. Partly, we think one went to may well have gone to Keith McNamara, who of course left the authority at some point. So we've never tracked any of those down. I mean, you know, participating in these projects and in any service improvement, we don't want to make it an onerous task and for it to be, you know, to have barriers with this. But we do want to ensure that we're tracking what comes in and that it is managed correctly, and that the community plan team track that and then hand it on to the right service. I wasn't part of any of the liaison meetings that you referred to, so I'm not clear on what the discussions were. I mean, I think as Claire said, it's unfortunate that we didn't get the group's participation request in and involve them at the point and stage that they wanted to be involved. But I think we do feel that there has been correspondence with them at various stages through the process through other routes. But
okay, thanks. I think it would have been useful, maybe, given that this was this was a known situation, maybe to have reflected on that in the report. But thank you for the answers that have been provided.
Thank you both. Councillor Peter Barrett, you have a question.
Thanks, convener. My question was with regard to community asset transfer in paragraph 3.3, and I wanted to ask a question in two parts. Firstly was, has anything useful come out of the Scottish Government National Asset Transfer Group to assist our approach? And has our approach to CAT been developed through learning from authorities with higher volumes of transfers being approved at all?
Okay, I'll ask, I think Lee is on the call. I'll ask Lee to take the first part of that question, Councillor, if that's okay.
It's a very short answer, to be honest. I'm not familiar with the Scottish Government Asset Transfer Group, so I've seen nothing from that group before.
I think in terms of the second part of the question, Councillor, we do look around what other authorities are doing. We are going to review how we're promoting asset transfers. I think we would taking perhaps a more, shall we say, enterprising approach to it. We went down to Durham a few years ago, and they actually marketed their vacant properties almost like an estate agent would, in terms of nice glossy brochures and nice photographs, and laying out what those buildings were like. And I think that's actually an approach. Because at the moment, though we are actively discussing needs of groups, needs with groups and what they might like in terms of buildings and resources, we don't actively kind of go out and market to across Perth and Kinross and pick up at groups who may be interested in this. So I mean but that's something we are going to review once we get back to normality and buildings start getting used again, and see where we are with that.
Thank you. Lee, did you want to come in with a comment there?
Thank you, Convener. It was just to say, within the appendix attached to the report for both community asset transfer and participation requests, there are a couple of tables of improvement actions, and the table for improvement actions for community asset transfer reflects the points that Councillor Barrett has made and that David's alluded to. I was just going to say one more thing in terms of learning from other local authorities. One of my team members, James Gardner, who's the kind of the lead contact for groups who initiate a community asset transfer or tell us they might be interested in it, has attended some training seminars provided by a national organisation, the Development Trust Association for Scotland, who are Scottish Government funded. And that's for people who are supporting organisations with community asset transfer to share information and best practice. And I'm actually very pleased to be able to let you know that on a number of occasions, it's been the Perth and Kinross documentation, policies and approaches that have been highlighted as good practice, and others have been encouraged to learn from us, which is really positive.
Okay, thank you very much, Lee.
Thank you. I have another question from Councillor Shires.
That was a very welcome clarification at the end there, Lee. Thanks for that. I suppose my question is around the time that all of these things, I know that there's a necessity for things to take time, but having been involved with the Bulgarian Ratry Community Development Trust about the Leslie Street opportunity, I think that's the thing, and anything that we can do that builds in, well, the 3G pitch down at Ratry was another example. They'd gone down a route and then they discovered that it had to go to Common Good Fund, and that was dispiriting for them, because they thought they had ticked all the boxes, and then lo, there was another box to tick. So I think my question would be, as part of this review, is there an opportunity for us to look at putting together a really simple, clear package for community groups that they can use as a reference document, building on best practice within Perth and Kinross, and also looking at elsewhere? So is that tabled in for the work to be done?
Thanks, Councillor. Yeah, I think we will look at the process from beginning to end. I mean, the paper highlights the expression of interest, if you like, at the start, and often groups come forward with, an idea, and then when there's a bit more detailed discussion with them, and we talk about the building, what that means, and sort of managing it, sometimes they may take another path. I think there's been 2 asset transfers that I've got kind of quite close to nearly over the line, and then the trustees of the charity have changed, of course they've come in because it is a big thing taking a building on, and they've kind of gone, well, actually we want to, have another look at this. And you're right, all these things do take time, and groups sometimes take a lease arrangement rather than taking full ownership. But yeah, in answer to your question, we will look at everything, see what other good practice there is that we might be able to pick up, and lessons that we've learned through the asset transfers, that have gone through, and then we'll bring that back and let elected members know what that looks like.
Thank you, David. I'm not seeing any further questions coming through now. Nothing there. Okay, so what I'll do is I will sum up. The report before you provides an update on the work of the Community Planning Partnership since our last committee in May. It details the work of the board in conjunction with a short life working group and its work to revise the local outcomes improvement plan and draft priorities which will be aligned with the offer and to be subsequently approved by the council in due course. The report also details plans to create a new statutory community learning and development plan which will support people and communities in learning, personal development and citizenship. It will also work on key inequality issues as listed in the paper. To be aligned with the local outcomes improvement plan and the Perth and Kinross offer, it too will be presented to council for approval. Finally, regarding community empowerment, this paper includes the annual report on the number of community asset transfer requests, participation requests and inquiries for the year ended 31st March 2021 as shown in Appendix 1. One community asset transfer has received approval during the year and several inquiries and expressions of interest were generated in this period, of which a small number may well develop into formal requests. Uptake on participation requests remains low across the whole country, and Perth and Kinross has proved to be no different, with only one valid request received during the reporting period. And unfortunately, this was refused due to the project being near completion of the tendering phase. Both sections of the appendix comment on the need for improvements and to raise awareness. The recommendation for this committee is to note the CPP activity since May 2021 and approve the annual report on community asset transfers and participation requests as shown in Appendix 1. Members, I'm moving the paper. Vice Convener, would you second?
Yes, I'm happy to second the report.
With that, members, I will open up for any comments. I'm not seeing any comments coming through. One comment coming through. Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, I guess it's the remark that I made at the end of my questioning on this. In terms of the identified issue with the particular participation request, which was the only one that the council had to deal with, what we've done is we've identified the issue that there can be other options for engagement and participation. But I wonder whether a further appropriate improvement action would not be to make further channels available for the formal participation requests that are received from the communities, given the circumstances that that occurred with the participation request in question.
Okay, thank you for your comment. And with that, members, I'll be happy to move the paper. I agree to move the paper.
Agreed.
Thank you. Now, before we move on to the next paper, paper 6, I've had a request for a comfort break, so I'm going to suggest members we have a short break for 10 minutes. It's now 11 o'clock, so we've been on for an hour and a half now. So if we can resume at 10 past 11, that gives everybody a short break, and we'll resume on the next paper. Thank you. I'll see you all at 10 past 11. Members, by my clock, we're back to 10 past 11. I'm assuming everybody's here with us again. So we'll now proceed to paper 6. And I'll ask Mrs. Mailer to introduce the paper, and I believe we have a short video after that. So over to you, Claire.
Thank you, Convener. The report committee has been asked to consider today is our final annual update in implementing the current local housing strategy. By way of an introduction, we've got a short video clip which provides an overview of our key achievements over the last year, all of which were delivered within the context of what has been the most challenging of years. The video clip that you'll see is one that we use to sort of provide an overview to our tenants and indeed staff of the strategy, the work that we're doing. So it has far wider usage than just today, and hopefully it'll give a flavour of some of the work that's been undertaken over the course of the last year. Thank you.
Thank you. So hopefully, technology willing, we'll see the video. Here we go.
Every local authority is required by the Scottish Government to produce a local housing strategy and provide regular progress updates. The strategy must set out priorities and plans for the delivery of housing and housing-related services over a 5-year period. This video provides the final annual progress update in implementing the 5-year strategy. The Perth and Kinross Local Housing Strategy 2016 to 2021 was approved at the Housing and Health Committee in May 2016. Our strategy has 4 strategic objectives: supply of housing and sustainable communities, housing and homelessness, independent living, housing condition, fuel poverty, and climate change. This is what we have achieved in the final year of the 2016-2021 Local Housing Strategy against these 4 objectives. Our aim is to create more affordable homes and manage existing stock to create homes of the size, type, and in the location people want, with access to services and facilities which encourage community integration. During 2020-2021, we have delivered a total of 136 new houses for social rent, bought back a further 28 former council homes to add to our stock, provided suitable housing to 131 overcrowded households, helped invest over £17 million of Scottish Government grant funding to take forward affordable housing developments by the Council and our RSL partners, brought 17 empty properties back into use through our Empty Homes initiative, assisted 178 households to access good quality, affordable accommodation in the private rented sector, managed 199 properties for let in the private sector. The impact has been to meet housing need in the area, providing housing for a number of households through a range of options. This has reduced waiting lists and met a range of housing needs in the area, including overcrowding, alleviating homelessness, and addressing medical need. Our aim is to promote safe and secure communities for residents with access to good quality, affordable accommodation. We also aim to put the necessary support in place to sustain tenants in their homes and prevent them from becoming homeless. During 2020-2021, we reduced homeless presentations by a further 12%, following a 19% reduction in 2019-2020. This is compared to a 9% reduction in homelessness nationally. We reduced homeless presentations from families by 40% and young people by 13%. We had the lowest number of households in temporary accommodation, as 0.5 households per 100,000 population, We had the shortest length of stay in temporary accommodation nationally, with an average of 76 days. The national average was 184 days. We contacted over 7,500 tenants to carry out welfare checks to make sure that they were offered support with food, money, health, and well-being. We offered to maintain contact with tenants for as long as they needed help. We doubled our Sustaining Tenancies Fund to £300,000 in recognition that tenants may be facing reduced incomes due to the pandemic. The impact has been the delivery of a good performing, high quality, value for money service for our tenants. We have minimized the impact, stigma, and duration of homelessness on people in Perth and Kinross. Our aim is to support people to live independently at home for as long as possible, with the help from the community and local support networks. During 2020-2021, we have delivered 24 new houses designed to meet the needs of individuals and households with limited mobility and particular support requirements. We made significant progress in delivering dependent living projects. Work on 8 new flats in Milne Street was completed in April 2021, and progress was also made on projects at Rannoch Road, Dunkeld Road in Perth, and in Rattray. We carried out 27 major and 143 minor adaptations, on average within 45 days, to council houses to facilitate independent living. We installed 28 modular ramps, 14 in council homes and 14 in private homes. We approved 200 major adaptation grants to private sector households. At the year end, 159 of these had been completed. We provided short-term floating housing support to over 1,200 clients. The impact has been to support many households to access the housing they need or to remain in their homes with support or adaptations that are suitable for their current and future needs. This has allowed them to live independently for longer. Our aim is to support residents to live in warm, dry, energy-efficient and low-carbon homes which they can afford to heat. Unfortunately, all of our programs were affected by the pandemic, restricting the work which could be carried out to our houses. Nevertheless, during 2020-2021, we have installed over 250 central heating systems. We started our local house condition survey. We increased the number of council properties with renewable technologies. 41 properties had air source heat pumps installed and solar water heating was installed in 52 houses. We developed and delivered online training on fuel poverty awareness for frontline staff. The impact of these measures ensures that our tenants' homes meet the SHQS and are well maintained. In addition, many owners and private tenants are benefiting from more energy-efficient homes. Working collaboratively with our stakeholders has been key to the delivery of this success. As we go forward, this will be further enhanced as the service plays its part in the development of the emerging Perth and Kinross offer. The Perth and Kinross offer provides a platform to allow us to agree how we can align budgets, use our resources for maximum impact, and ensure local communities have services where and when they need them. We are currently working on the revised strategy and will submit to the Scottish Government in 2022 so that we can continue our successful work to provide appropriate housing and housing support for everyone who needs in Perth and Kinross. Thank you for watching.
Well, thank you for that. Technology works, so that was good. It was interesting. I'm getting some feedback, I'm afraid. Try again. That's clear. So members, that was a video. Claire, did you want to add anything to that before we go to questions?
No, quite happy to go straight to questions. Thank you.
Fine, thank you very much. So I have a first question up. Councillor McEwen.
Thank you very much, Convener. On page 126 of our papers, I think it's page 20 of the actual the report, it describes how about 82% of our properties meet the energy efficiency standards, and I know these standards are getting improved and tightened as we move forward. Of the properties that don't meet that, can we get a breakdown of those properties and what are we doing to bring them online? What are we prioritising? What's the important things to do now for them?
Claire, would you come back on that?
Yes, I'll see if we can give you a bit of detail. As committee are aware, we own approximately 7,760 properties. Of these, 6,254 meet the SHQS standard. There are a number of properties that don't meet, and those are for a range of reasons. I won't give you all of the detail of the figures, but I can share the detail if that would be helpful with committee afterwards. But a number were exempt due to the fabric of the building, design features, and indeed in some cases owners refusing to participate in installing the measures required. A number don't meet due to abeyances, and a number don't meet the criteria. So overall we've got 818 not meeting. You'll see within the report, in terms of the SHQS and the EISH standards, the Scottish Housing Regulator during last year have included the EISH standards within the SHQS. So that has obviously reflected the shift in terms of our performance, our overall performance. Due to the impact of COVID last year, a large number of our energy efficiency and central heating replacement works were understandably unable to progress, and therefore some of the properties that might have met the SHQS and the standard, we weren't able to do so and bring them up to standard. So during the current year, our focus, absolutely, I would like to reassure committee, is to address any of the failures that have been highlighted. We've got a range of programmes, as you'll see, in terms of our energy efficiency programme, heating insulation, and indeed our external refurbishment programme. We're also targeting EPC surveys for any of our unknown properties. So work is absolutely progressing at pace throughout the current year, and I think we're confident in terms of significant improvement. I think we've got Alan Stewart here, so if there's any more detailed questions I could refer, but hopefully that gives you an overview of where we're at, but I'm happy to share more detailed information in terms of the actual numbers with committee following today's meeting.
I'm happy with that answer, Convener. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Next question is from Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Convener. I'm looking at section 2.2 of the paper, and sorry, I should have said before I started, I welcome the updates in this paper. We're making some very good progress towards tackling the housing crisis in our local area. Section 2.2 of the paper is where my question is specifically. It says there the impact of these activities has been to meet housing need in the area. I initially sort of read that as maybe thinking that we're saying that we're already meeting all of the housing need in the area, then realised I'm probably reading it in a particular way there. My question though is, it prompted me to ask for a reminder maybe of how many people do we have on our housing list? I know that's that has various priority groups, but do officers perhaps have to hand the figures in terms of the number of households we have waiting in each of those groups at the current time, please, just so that we're aware of the hill we have left to climb in housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I think you probably have misread it, but I think there always will be a need. Claire.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we are obviously meeting need on a continual basis, and as household circumstances and people's situations change on a daily basis, then obviously new need is always coming in, and so we've always got new demand coming through. We currently have approximately 3,300 applicants on our waiting list. Again, we could give you the breakdown in terms of each of the different categories of need. We do have a large number of applicants on the waiting list that are actually there with no assessed housing need. Anybody can apply for housing through our waiting list, and there are obviously a number of applicants on the list who are actually assessed as being adequately housed. But I don't know, Elaine, if you've got to hand the breakdown, but it might be something, again, I'll add it to the previous question and we can give you the detailed breakdown in terms of medical need, overcrowding need, and so on.
If you could do that, that'd be most useful.
The information actually is available. We normally have the information available online so people can see the demand for each area and the approximate waiting time. So we'll point you in the direction of that link as well, Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, that's perfect, thanks.
Thank you. Next question is Councillor Waters.
Thank you, convener. Item 2.6 in the papers lists some of the challenges, and one of the challenges that's listed is working within a construction market where there is likely to be continued shortage of labour and material. Following on from the news items based on the survey work that's done by IHS Market and CIPS Construction Survey over the input cost inflation, which they're saying is accelerating at an alarming rate within the construction industry. You know, this is mainly due to severe shortages of building supplies, transport capacity, import backlogs, and the certainly from the articles in numerous newspapers and numerous periodicals, this is largely because of COVID restrictions, Brexit delays and shipping hold-ups, higher wages due to scarcity of overseas workers and the skills. And in relation to the housing strategy, and we've had this pointed out with some of the larger projects in Perth and Kinross over the risks over materials and with labour. But regarding the housing strategy and over the build of new houses, adaptations and repairs, what challenges faces this new strategy document as it's progressing and trying to model and trying to predict these changes, and what impact will that have on what we're able to deliver if the costs for building new houses or adaptations or repairs are accelerating, I believe is what the actual report highlights. What risks are there for continuing the good work that's already been done and dealing with homelessness and creating affordable housing throughout the area?
Claire, would you like to handle that one? It's quite a complicated question there.
Yes, thank you for the question, and I certainly think that is, you know, as you've described, I think you've probably articulated very well some of the significant challenges that the construction sector and indeed, you know, across the council, as we've heard through the recent elected member briefings over the last few weeks. And obviously, the housing service is no exemption, you know, no exclusion to that, and absolutely in terms of going forward, we will need to continue to monitor the impacts. We've seen a number of impacts in terms of increased costs and delays with supplies of materials, particularly in terms of our responsive repairs at the moment. And those of you who would have been at SPNR last week will have seen that we've put in additional provision within the budget to account for increased costs. Approximately exactly the same as across the wider industry, construction industry. At the moment, we're experiencing about a 20% increase. Whilst we're comfortable as we are at the moment in terms of our wider projects, because a lot of these projects are ongoing rolling programmes, there obviously have been some delays. The longer term strategy and planning activity, I think, have to be key considerations. And again, we can say at this stage, we're not sure if these kind of increased costs and indeed delays are set to continue. We need to continue to monitor the overall market, and we'll do so across the council in terms of the overarching capital programme. So we have got a number of activities planned. We're certainly reviewing our overall capital programme in light of increased risks and pressures and indeed emerging new priorities. and those will be factored into sort of our cost assumptions going forward in terms of the ongoing HRA programme. So we're doing some work as we speak at the moment. We're looking at our rent setting proposals for next year. We're looking at the additional pressures that are coming in and what that actually might mean. So it is a work in progress. We're continuing to review it very, very closely and indeed consider all of these kind of risks that you have described.
Thank you for that answer.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Peter Barrett.
And thanks very much, convener. I've got two questions, so if I could get the opportunity to come back for a second, I would be very grateful. However, my first question is with regard to multi-storey flats and energy efficiency and insulation works. The committee was advised in May that efforts were being made to secure extra resource to take forward works on Potter Hill and Pomerium, but at full council last week we heard about the backlog in processing, advertising and filling of posts. So I'm keen to know what progress is being made with that, and if we're still on track to utilise the HEAPS, ABS and ECO funding and engage with the Potter Hill and Pomerium tenants and residents on the external wall insulation. Has a technical solution which meets the requirements of East 2 been identified, and when will the long-standing issues around works on external features be addressed? Because we're in danger of going through 2 full council terms with virtually no progress and no visible progress being made on this.
Thank you, Councillor. I normally ask Nicola Lennon to come on this, but I think she's away. So Elaine, I think you've been briefed partly, and Claire, you might want to come in afterwards.
Before I pass over to Elaine, I think it might be helpful just to set the context in terms of the work that has already been undertaken. We've already undertaken a significant amount of work within our multi-storey blocks, and they meet or indeed exceed the SHQS. I would absolutely stress we remain absolutely committed to the programme of works within our multi-storey blocks. And to date, we've already invested over 1.5 million to deliver a range of enhancements, including the installation of smoke detection systems, new triple glazed windows, external doors, individual flat doors. And Councillor Barrett, absolutely what we are committed to ensuring that we have the capacity within the team to progress at a greater pace. We obviously have had 18 months of a pandemic, which has obviously delayed some plans somewhat, but we have identified additional resources that will support this work going forward. So a range of plans are underway that will be developed for potential improvement works, which will include works for balconies, stairwells and communal areas. So I don't know, Elaine, if there's any more that you would like to add to that, or any more detail. And I know that Alan's here in terms of the HEAPS, ABS and ECO funding. You might want to come in with a wee bit more detail on that question.
Elaine, would you like to come in?
Yeah, just to give the reassurance that we appreciate the pace has been a bit slow, but we've done a lot of structural and investigatory work. Most of them were slightly delayed as a result of COVID, but it's to allow us to take a full options appraisal of what is required in terms of investment and our upgrade strategy to ensure it meets the new energy efficiency requirements from the Scottish Government in terms of our zero carbon agenda. And we're now developing plans and options how to take that forward. So we're not just looking at the externals of the building, we've added more to the strategy in terms of, as Claire said, the balconies, stairwells and communal areas. And we've been engaging with the tenants through our quarterly newsletter. So work is slowly progressing and we're putting more resources into that. I'm frustrated as well with the slow progress, but we are getting there. We've got plans, we've got all the information, and it's about now looking at the options to take it forward.
And sorry, Councillor Barrett, did you want to come back on that, or can we move on to the next one?
Convener, just to say that I'm heartened that the external works and the features that have been mentioned are being addressed. That is good news, and I also appreciate there's been an acknowledgement of the really slow pace that there has been on this. I'm slightly concerned. There's a slight distinction between identifying the resource and actually filling the position with the person to use that resource. And are we there yet, or do we think that that's going to be a problem?
Claire, would you like to come back on that?
Elaine, I don't know if you've got a right up-to-date position in terms of the Yeah, we've identified.
We've got a resource in place, and it's just getting them fully up to speed where we're at, because we've done so much work on this in terms of the preparatory work, so it's getting them up to speed. So again, you might not see it over the next couple of weeks, but I can assure you over the next couple of months we will make sure that there's stuff coming out. So it's just giving that officer and the team a bit of time to get to all the information together. It's such a massive task. We've got over 300 tenants, and they're not all council tenants, so it's a massive task and we need to get it right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll come back to you, Peter, for the next question, if I may. Councillor Liz Barrett now.
Thank you, convener, and many thanks to Elaine and Norma and their teams for this report and all the work that lies behind it and the great achievements that have been made during the very challenging last year of this strategy. I have two related questions on energy efficiency and housing condition. On page 126, the energy efficiency private rented dwellings regulations have been postponed, and I wondered how long that was for and how we can better engage with private landlords who aren't taking action on housing condition and energy efficiency. And kind of related to that, in 2.8 on page 98, as already has been mentioned, the local house condition survey has started, and I just wondered how long it will be before that's finished. And I think in your reply to Councillor McEwen, you implied that quick wins are being tackled as you go along. So could you just confirm that, please? Thank you.
Claire, can I ask you for that one?
Yes, I think I'll answer your second question first, if that's okay. So the local housing stock condition survey, which again, as you know, has been delayed, and I think relating back to earlier questions in terms of informing our capital investment programme going forward, that has been a little bit problematic for us, but again, like I think across the whole of the UK and indeed more widely, these are the challenges that we're all facing. We anticipate good progress has been made over the course of the last few months, and we anticipate that the findings from the stock condition survey will be back with us by October. In terms of your query around and about the work with private landlords, a regulatory services team and indeed sort of our wider teams are providing support, advice and information to private landlords. I think there's been some activity through the Private Landlords Forum, and advice and information has been widely available to sort of, support landlords with the necessary information and advice, but we can get a little bit more detailed information on that out to you if that would be helpful.
Thank you. I'm just concerned some of them seem to be not engaging from what you said earlier, and it's just how to tackle things for the tenants in those properties. Yeah,
I would say we have good engagement from a good number of private landlords, both in terms of standards and in terms of supporting with tenants. Very often if we have engagement with tenants and there are concerns, then that gives us in terms of contact with private landlords. But the team are continuing to do that, and I think that kind of wider role through the local housing strategy is absolutely key to ensure that we're maintaining and improving standards across the full sector. So yeah, that work does continue, and the teams, if they are out and about undertaking a visit with one of our with a private sector tenant, and there's an issue that is raised, then that will be flagged up with the team and action will be taken as appropriate.
Thank you, Claire.
Thank you. Next question, Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, convener. Just a quick question on the proposed structure of the revised local housing strategy. At 3.4, the main sections for the strategy it's proposed to retitle them. One of the existing sections of the strategy is at 2.3, housing and homelessness, and I just wondered under which of the title headings proposed in 3.4 does homelessness fall? It doesn't seem to naturally fall under any of those new strategy headings to me, but obviously it should be a key a critical issue for us to address, continue addressing and address going forward.
Thank you, Councillor. It is an important fact. I think we've discussed this previously. It goes into more into part one, but I'll get Claire just to confirm that for me.
Norma, would you like to respond to that question, please?
Good morning. Yes, thanks for your question. Yes, the local housing strategy, there's a number of issues that kind of can be quite cross-cutting, but affordability and choice, actually, I think possibly homelessness will be in that section, because that will be about a range of housing options for people. Obviously, homelessness, it can fall into a number of categories. It could be in the more homes because there's a general homelessness issue to be resolved, but then there's also kind of more particular needs, and so that would probably come into two. So I would have said possibly 1 and 2, both there will be some reference to homelessness, but it will be within those earlier sections of the strategy. It will be covered in its entirety, maybe between sections, in fact.
If it's not a strategy section on its own, does it risk? Do we risk losing focus on it?
No, absolutely not. I mean, it's an integral part of the. We're focusing very much on the vision set out by the government on housing to 2040, and homelessness is central to that vision. So it certainly won't lose focus in our local housing strategy on homelessness being absolute in focus for the sharp end of the need that we're meeting. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis.
Sorry, having problems with this today, couldn't unmute myself. My question is about the problems that have been caused by COVID and the delays in all the programmes, repairs, modernisations, etc. Is there any sort of time scale of when we'll actually catch up and get all the works back on schedule?
I think Councillor focus is now to get caught up as quick as we can, but Claire, would you like to come in on that?
Yeah, and I do think, Councillor Jarvis, that's an interesting question, because we are catching up in some areas better than we are in other areas. I think actually in terms of the year-end outturn for our capital programme, we delivered on 80% of the original budget. So actually our achievements were probably better than we anticipated at one point in the midst of lockdown. You will also see in terms of the delivery of our new build housing, there were a few delays on those, and we didn't necessarily get the units completed within the year, within timescale, but we had good completions at Glebe, 65 units, Hunting Tower, Meagle and Milne Street. And although these were delayed, there were not significant delays with these projects. Another big focus for us actually has been the front-facing activity with our tenants. We had a backlog of routine repairs. For a long period during COVID, we were only able to access tenants' houses to undertake emergency repairs. So therefore we have had quite a backlog of routine repairs, and the team have done exceptionally well in terms of catching up with those repairs. We're facing some areas of concern surrounding about our voids. The discussion that we've just had in terms of delays with materials has actually caused a delay with our voids. So our void turnover is now sitting, I think, at approximately 40+ days against a normal outturn of 28 days. So some of it is, we are playing catch up wherever we can, but some of the other issues that we're facing across the construction sector are also presenting us with some challenges. So I think good progress has been made. One area that I think we're really clear about is we seem to be so far on track in terms of delivering the plans for the current year. But there are so many different areas across the service, it's difficult to sort of highlight one and say, right, we are on track or we're not. Some different areas are operating maybe at different paces.
Okay, thanks. Didn't really answer my question, but I can appreciate the difficulties, and I was at Hunting Tower last week, and that's quite an impressive development. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Now, I have one new question, if I may. That's Councillor Frank Smith. Would you like to have a question?
Thank you, Convener. Again, being new to all this, let's hope it's the right question. It's about the housing occupational therapist provision. I would like to know if it is written down in stone that if a person needs access to the house, is only one path allowed, and that is it, final. I have a case study at the moment and I'm finding it quite upsetting. So do you go out and assess the people, or do you just say that's it, one entrance, one ramp, finished? Thank you.
Claire, would you like to clarify that?
Thank you, Councillor Smith. No, it is not set in a tablet of stone, but that will obviously, the occupational therapist will undertake that assessment with the individual. I'm not sure if the particular case, obviously I'm not in a position to discuss a particular case with you here in committee, but we'd be happy for one of the team to contact you afterwards and have a discussion offline about that case. But each individual household is assessed individually, and any work that is undertaken will ensure that it meets the individual household's needs. So probably a separate discussion in terms of the particular case that you've mentioned might be helpful.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I've got no new questions, so I'll go back now to Councillor Peter Barrett.
Thanks once again, Convener. I want to preface this question by expressing my thanks to the Senior Service Housing Manager for her time and her candour at a meeting on earlier this week to discuss a ward antisocial behaviour issue. Antisocial behaviour and tenants and residents' rights to live in peace are mentioned in a few paragraphs on page 118 of the report, and there's reference to high resolution rates. But there isn't any reinforcement of the Council's commitment to tackling and preventing antisocial behaviour. So I'd like to ask the Deputy Director if she believes that the current approach meets the tenants and residents' expectations of their right to live in peace and on that right being fulfilled, or will tackling and preventing antisocial behaviour receive greater priority, resource and more attention in the next strategy? And as a final observation, I note that antisocial behaviour doesn't feature as one of the key priorities set out at the very end of this report, which is a concern to me.
Thank you, Councillor. I think this has been a subject that's been discussed with the Deputy Director from several members of the Council, so I'll ask her to answer this one, generally, of course.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett, for your question, and I absolutely take on board your comments in terms of, I think, the prominence of antisocial behaviour, perhaps within the update and indeed within the strategy. Going forward in terms of the new local housing strategy, you'll see that the plan is to undertake a range of consultation workshops with elected members and indeed with communities and indeed obviously with key stakeholders, and that will be one area that we will give further consideration to. I do appreciate that, you know, antisocial behaviour, particularly when it's long-standing, although I'm pleased to report that the cases are few and far between. I am absolutely not underestimating the impact on the households involved when it does occur, and often it can take us, our legal services team, a fairly significant period of time to resolve these issues. I would absolutely assure committee that, you know, our focus is ensuring sustainable tenancies, and that starts at the point of allocation. We certainly seek to ensure balanced and sustainable communities and consider that at the point of allocation. We do a fairly significant amount of work with our tenants in terms of their responsibilities and indeed our duties as a landlord. And indeed, as you know, we've got an extensive support team in place to provide the necessary support. Unfortunately, on occasions, the tenancy does break down or there are particular issues and we are forced to take action, and I would assure you that, you know, where that does occur, we do take action. But as part of the consultation and indeed in the new strategy going forward into next year, I think we will absolutely take on board the points that you have raised today and ensure that we kind of focus on that as part of the consultation exercise and indeed the key priorities going forward.
Thank you.
And I have a second question from Councillor Liz Barrett, I think.
Thank you, Convener. Quick question, actually related. We don't join up on what we're doing at these meetings, but it's related to the previous question. Just wondering, is there a link to advise residents of the availability and the use of the Noise app that's referred to on page 112 regarding safer and more secure communities? If this is something that elected members could share with residents when they raise antisocial behaviour issues?
That's a very good question. I think would be a good idea. Michelle, are you able to advise?
I'll need to double check that. I think there is a link, but I'm more than happy to circulate that to members after this group.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you very much, members. I'm not seeing any other questions coming through at the moment. I've just, if I may, perhaps ask a question myself related to the previous two questions about antisocial behaviour, and I just wonder how the pandemic has affected our ability to deal with these type of situations. Has it obviously made life much more difficult? But if you could just say, has it made life more difficult for us?
Absolutely. It has made life much more difficult. In terms of officers dealing with complaints, because we haven't had the ability to visit tenants and undertake the face-to-face contact, so that has been really challenging. But certainly for tenants and residents, the pandemic and the restrictions have obviously been very challenging, because people are having to live at home or stay at home or be at home for longer, or have had to, and therefore obviously in terms of household noise, people working and living from home has obviously exacerbated the situation. So unfortunately we have seen an increase in terms of the numbers of noise complaints over the course of the pandemic. So now that restrictions are easing, things certainly have settled down a bit.
Okay, thank you very much. And in that time, there's been no further questions come through, so I will proceed to sum up. This paper outlines the progress of the Perth and Kinross local housing strategy for the year 2020-2021, and it is the final annual update for the strategy covering the period 2016 to 2021. There were 4 key objectives: supply of housing and sustainable communities, housing and homelessness, independent living, and house condition, fuel poverty and climate change. The full report, which forms Appendix 1, makes for good reading overall, and details what has been achieved in very difficult circumstances against the backdrop of the COVID-19 pandemic. It's impossible to list all the achievements in the time allowed, but some of those as examples are that 809 new homes completed during the period, of which 136 were for social rent, and of those 24 were suitable for residents with limited mobility. 26 ex-council properties were purchased through the buyback scheme. A new 1.6 million development of affordable homes was completed at 6 Milne Street, a block of 8 flats with accommodation especially designed for wheelchair users and people with specific needs. Home First continued to perform and lead the way in outcomes, with the number of families presenting as homeless down by 40%. The number of young single people presenting as homeless also fell by 13%. Our rent levels continue to be the most affordable in the area and around the 3rd lowest in Scotland. And to help independent living, 27 major and 143 minor adaptations to council housing took place. And we've also helped tenants become digitally included. Some elderly tenants, of course, just shows that there is no limit to learning, no age limit to learning. And funding from the Warm Home Funds allowed 309 properties to be improved, thereby helping to reduce fuel poverty. Members will recall that it was previously agreed to delay the preparation of the next local housing strategy due in 2021 until next year, and this was an acceptable arrangement with the Scottish Government. Whilst the structure of the new strategy will remain unchanged, it must reflect the vision of Scotland's homes and communities in the future as we move towards 2040, given that the main sections will become more homes at the heart of great places, affordability and choice to promote independent living, affordable warmth and zero emission homes, and improving the quality of all homes. And whilst detailing the work carried out over the year, the report also highlights what is planned next. The final pages of the report clearly reflect the effect that COVID-19 has had on the performance of the service, and I'm sure we can all appreciate the challenges faced by our team. The priority of the 12 months reported was, and quite rightly, the health and well-being of all our tenants above all else. As a result, there have been delays on some works and projects. Both Vice Convener and myself were supportive of this, given the extreme pressures the service was having to work under. And I take this opportunity once again to thank them all. We read the words on the papers of this report before us and comment, but it is they that make it happen. However, we can't sit back. As restrictions have now eased, we now need to refocus on those works and projects, bring contractors back online and pushing forward while considering any new building standards such as revised energy efficiency requirements imposed by the Scottish Government. These are now the focus of the future months. The recommendation for this committee is that it notes the progress made during 2020-21 towards achieving the outcomes set out within the local housing strategy as directed in Appendix 1, and approves the proposed structure of the revised local housing strategy to be submitted to the Scottish Government in 2022. Therefore, I move the paper. Vice Convener, would you second?
Yes, I'm happy to second this excellent report. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And with that, I'll open up the comment. Councillor McEwen, you've come forward with a comment.
Yes, I'd first like to mention that the latter question in there about antisocial behaviour in our social housing, that I echo Councillor Barrett's concerns and your concerns, Convener, towards this. When antisocial behaviour happens, it has an extraordinarily huge negative impact on our residents, and it's something that we really need to prioritise and do better at. And that's from my own experience in the ward, as you well know, Convener. Convener and Council Officers, I welcome this report and the plans being put in place to develop the next local housing strategy in 2022. It can never be said often enough that the officers and the housing team across Perth and Kinross have performed with amazing professionalism and dedication to our tenants in what has been the most difficult circumstances with COVID. The effect of COVID is clearly evident in the statistics presented in this paper and the delays in our plans as a council to improve our housing stock. I am pleased to see us using recent underspends to advance this delayed work as expediently as possible. The Scottish Government has led the way on housing and having a home means to people of Scotland, with guidance, strategy and acts passed at the Scottish Parliament. This document mentions Housing 20 to 2040, the Planning Act, Fuel Poverty Act, Child Poverty Act, climate change plans with stringent targets that are now backed up by our Green partners in government, and the Fair Scotland Action Plan. We all need somewhere to live. We all want to live somewhere we can call home. What is affordable, warm, meets our needs, and is a thriving community we want to be part of, near the services we rely on? That's a direct quote from the Housing to 2040. And now, following the Holyrood victory in May, this SNP Scottish Government now go forward in partnership with the Green Party and have reaffirmed their commitment to a fairer Scotland and the belief that housing is a fundamental right that underpins the health, well-being, happiness and life chances of our people in our communities. And I pledge that an SNP administration in Perth and Kinross, come the elections in May 22, would prioritise to advance this vision and make the right to a suitable, affordable, warm and safe home a reality for the people living in Perth and Kinross. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm not sure how to answer some of that, to be honest, but not wanting to get too political. But
it's a comment.
I'm not going to know. I don't know how to answer it, but I won't. Councillor Peter Barrett, I think you put Q in the question, but I'm assuming you mean a comment.
I did put a queue down by mistake, Convener. I thought we were going to move swiftly on to item 7, rather than indulge in the fantasy politics that Councillor McEwen would like to air within this virtual chamber. So I think the less said about that, the better. It will be very interesting to see the negative impacts that the Greens have on the HRA and the viability of the new build programmes in the years to come with them in the Scottish Government. But we'll just need to see how that pans out.
I'm not seeing any comments coming through, members. So are we happy to agree the paper?
Agreed.
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 Thank you all. So that now takes us to the last paper today, paper 7, which is the annual assurance statement for 2021. Sorry, 2020-21. This has been typed the wrong way around, of course, as you read it. Claire, I think you're going to introduce this one as well.
Thank you, Convener. As committee members are aware, the Council and all social landlords in Scotland are required to submit an annual assurance statement to the Scottish Housing Regulator, providing assurance that we're meeting legislative and regulatory requirements. This is the third year that we've been required to publish an annual assurance statement. The report that committee has been asked to consider sets out the detail of the Scottish Housing Regulator's regulatory framework and an overview of the work that they do to assure themselves that landlords are meeting their responsibilities. The report provides an overview of the evidence used to support assurance, our approach to seeking tenant assurance, and details of our self-assessment exercise. Last year, for all of the obvious reasons, was the most challenging, and the health and safety of our tenants was, of course, of paramount priority. Despite these challenges, we complied with all but one regulatory requirement. Like the majority of landlords, and as a result of COVID-19, we did not materially comply with the gas safety regulations, missing 128 services during the year as a result of tenants shielding or self-isolating. The approach we followed was in line with national guidance, and we maintained good communication throughout with all tenants affected. And as soon as we were able, outstanding services were undertaken, and we currently have none that are outstanding. We continue to deliver high levels of service delivery and have maintained strong performance across all areas within the context of maintaining affordable rent levels and being one of the lowest rent levels in Scotland. If approved by committee today, we will submit the annual assurance statement to the Scottish Housing Regulator. Thank you. We'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Claire. I'll open up for questions. I haven't seen any start coming through yet. My system's a little bit slow this morning, I must admit. Councillor Peter Barrett, they finally got through.
So thank you for that again, Convener. Paragraph 2.22 refers to the annual return of the Charter. Could Claire please explain to me the distinction between the ARC return and the assurance statement, and will the ARC return and all its indicators come before the committee?
I think it would, but Claire, would you like to answer that?
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. So the annual return of the Charter is the ARC return, and that is a very detailed document which provides an overview of our performance against all of the key performance indicators, ranging from all areas of service delivery, homelessness, housing options, housing repairs, right the way through to all of the work within our locality teams. So all local authorities are required to submit these, covers a huge number of indicators under each of the Charter outcomes. The annual assurance statement is distinct from that because that is actually our ability to meet our performance against meeting the regulatory requirements of the Scottish Housing Regulator. So everything within the annual return of the Charter fits within that. The key activity that sits within the annual return of the Charter, so the ARC return as we call it, is reported in a range of ways through, for example, the report that you've just received, the local housing strategy, our BMIP updates, our service BMIP updates, and some of our wider performance reporting. Some of it is very much a drill down, so the high level performance indicators form part of the previous update report that you had, and there will be further coming through in terms of our BMIP report as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Claire, as well. I'm not seeing any further questions coming through, so I will proceed to sum up. No, nothing at all. Right, so the Scottish Housing Regulator's regulatory framework requires that this council approve and submit an annual assurance statement as a confirmation that it is meeting all necessary standards for social housing in Scotland. This report gives brief details of the framework, with the annual assurance statement included for approval by this committee. This is a self-regulatory approach, assuring ourselves, our tenants and the Scottish Housing Regulator of compliance. As you will have read, we failed and have declared such to complete all gas safety checks. This was a consequence of COVID-19 restrictions and tenants necessarily shielding. Fortunately, as restrictions eased, tenant confidence returned, and through our own safety measures, there are now no outstanding checks required. It is the responsibility of this committee to approve the annual assurance statement with no approval requirement from tenants. That said, there have been several digital sessions with the service user review and evaluation team where overall performance was considered and allowance made for feedback on possible improvement. In 2020, an independent survey was commissioned and subsequently carried out by telephone over a sample of tenants measuring their satisfaction over several key indicators. The actual survey was carried out during November and December and gave a result that some 82% were satisfied with the overall performance of Perth and Kinross as landlord. Proposed key improvements are detailed, including the aim to have all housing stock meeting the new energy efficiency standard for social housing, that is EESSH2, by December 2032. As we have become used to, the housing team continues to deliver a high standard of service, giving high levels of tenant satisfaction, and with affordable rents being the third lowest in Scotland, as I've mentioned before. The recommendation for this committee is that it notes the requirement to submit an annual assurance statement and approves the annual assurance statement as detailed in Appendix 2. I'll consequently move the paper. Vice Convener, would you second?
Happy to second.
Thank you, Vice Convener. I'll open up now for any comments. There are no comments through, so are we happy to agree the paper?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you very much, everyone. And that actually completes the committee meeting of this morning. It remains for me to thank everyone. Thank you all for your attendance and your questions. Thank you, of course, to the officers for their support. And without them, we wouldn't have got through this morning, I'm sure. So thank you to all of you.